here with Dustin Ransom, who is, how long have we known each other? About 4 or 5 years now, probably?
5 years, I think.
5 years, yeah. And I will go on record officially, having said this to many, many people, but I will go on record officially saying that you are unequivocally the most talented multi-instrumentalist I have ever met in my entire life.
Thank you.
And I don't say that lightly. I would not say it if I did not mean it, I promise.
I appreciate that.
But yeah, you are just ridiculous, and I can't wait to start diving into the ridiculously. But Dustin plays everything. He plays. What did you first start on? What was your main thing?
I started I started on piano and drums at the same time.
Okay. How old were you when you started?
I was 3.
I don't think we ever talked about how you got into music and what kind of fired you up. So maybe, hit me with some of the first stuff.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, when I was very little, I was 2 and 3 years old, my parents had bought me the original Nintendo Entertainment System.
Okay.
The NES.
Yep.
And I was...
With Duck Hunt and Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah. I played that game and Super Mario Brothers 3, I mean, so much that when I was 4, my parents entered me into a Super Mario Brothers 3 competition.
No kidding.
And I came in 4th place out of like a room of probably 50 people. I was 4 years old.
Wow.
Right? And so I had all this coordination, and my mom was like, well, we can probably do something with that. So she put me in piano lessons when I was 3, and I took piano lessons for almost 20 years past that point. And then my dad is a really big Elvis Presley fan, and when I was a kid, I would watch Elvis's Aloha from Hawaii special. I mean, I've probably seen that thing at least 2,000 times. And
whether you like it or not.
Yeah. No, I really do love it.
Yeah.
I still do. But I was enamored with Elvis's drummer at the time, which was Ronnie Tutt, who was just a monster player. Even as I got older and became a professional musician and went back and listened to him playing on those records and in those live performances, I was like, holy crap, this guy is unbelievable. He went to North Texas as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But all that to say, I just started building little drum sets out of buckets and pans and using pencils for sticks. And then a few years later, when I was 7 or 8, my parents bought me a little drum set that I taught myself how to play for a few years. And then I started taking lessons, and and then I went to school for it.
That is interesting. That coordination is what your parents saw in you to lead you to music. Wow, I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
Where did they get the idea from? Are they musical at all?
They aren't. I mean, my dad knows maybe 3 chords, 4 chords on guitar, and that was really about it. I mean, they had an appreciation for music and thankfully for good music. I was fortunate that I didn't grow up in one of these hyper conservative Christian homes that I've heard so many people talk about, where they couldn't listen to anything except Christian music. And so since I wasn't raised in a religious home, I was listening to anything from a very young age. So, yeah.
Well, it's fascinating the coordination aspect of it, because coordination, like if somebody puts you in music, usually it's like, oh, you can carry a tune, or you know what that note is, or you've got perfect pitch.
Right.
So how did you translate that coordination into music? I mean, coordination and music are 2 different things for me.
Yes.
But how did that correlate in your brain? Do you feel like the coordination is more powerful than the actual musical things, or was music also equal to that kind of power?
For me, coordination in a lot of ways is just kind of a means to an end. Which I didn't know that at the time. I was 3. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not wrong with you, man? I'm not abstract thinking that young.
Yeah. But when did music start entering, and where coordination and music started melding together? I mean, obviously you're 3. I mean, it's crazy to say that, but when did you? I mean, your parents could have put you in sports. I mean, they could have.
And they tried. They put me. I played t-ball for a year, and I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it after that. I wanted to play baseball past the fact. I mean, I was and am such a creative, artistic person, and
Okay.
I always have been since a very young age, that it appealed to me more to play piano and and play video games,
Yeah.
but also draw and paint. And
I was just gonna say, did you do any of
oh
that
yeah,
too?
I
Okay.
did a lot.
Yeah.
I was really good. I was really good with handwriting. I would enter into drawing competitions and art competitions and stuff like that, and sometimes win.
Wow.
When I was a kid. But I was just much more interested in the creative arts. And so the coordination thing, I think what that did in essence was it just naturally propelled me towards so many different things that, to me, and I would still say this, people, will say, how do you play all these instruments and how do you learn all this stuff? And to me, it's just kind of like I'm speaking in different accents of the same language.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
For me, like when I play piano, I'm often thinking of my favorite guitar players. Like what would it sound like for me to play this part on piano that I learned on guitar? What's that going to sound like? How's that going to resonate with me? And like, how do my fingers work that way? And it's almost like building up this giant bank of muscle memory. And I don't know. I think it reminds me of when James Brown would talk about how everything in the band needed to be a drum. Everything needed to be a drum.
Yeah.
And so I think about that a lot when I'm writing and playing. It's like, if this thing doesn't groove well, if I don't move while I'm doing it, then I probably need to figure something out. And that doesn't always apply, especially say for ambient music or things like that. But my point is that I just used the double is. My point is that the coordination is a means to an end. And I also think that for me personally, it helps tie all of that stuff together, because I'm really pulling from the same creative place all around. It just manifests itself differently.
Yeah. So did you pick up the other instruments and just, obviously you're trained in piano.
Mm-hmm.
That's a thing, which is probably the best thing to be trained in, to transfer the other things, other than
Sure.
drums, of course,
Yeah.
with coordination. But when you move into the other instruments, obviously there's a discipline that's involved with that.
Mm-hmm.
And also did you find that as you picked more instruments up, they were easier to learn because you had a learning process?
I did. When I first started learning guitar, the only roadblock I had in my way was just getting my fingers used to moving a particular way, as opposed to, they're moving
You're
with
pulling,
my hand
I guess,
inverted.
as
I'm
opposed to
pulling as
pushing.
opposed to pushing, so to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah.
But that was, as I kind of alluded to, it was really easy for me to advance on guitar pretty quickly because I already knew theory, I knew how to read, I knew rhythms, I knew all that stuff. So really it was just a matter of figuring out, like, oh, well, there's a D and there's an A and there's an F sharp on guitar. Oh, there's my D chord.
Yeah.
Great. All right, let's just keep finding those. Let's just keep finding those spots.
Where is it
that
up the
happens.
neck?
Yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, man. It's like, I love talking about this stuff because in some ways it kind of helps dispel the mystery for people sometimes.
You're just like fast or rewind 2 minutes ago when you said people always come to you and say, man, how do you play all those instruments?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not at your level, but I also play a bunch of different things. And it's
Oh,
one
you're
of those
very
things,
good at what you do.
Well, it's one of those things where it gets frustrating. It's like, I don't know, you just pick it up and you do it. Like,
Right.
But you're right. It's like people think that it's so out of reach, but it's just not out of reach.
And I would say that certain folks with certain personality types have a proclivity towards doing that stuff, and
Absolutely.
others don't.
Just like there's lawyers and doctors.
Absolutely,
and
and I
that's not
don't
who
have a proclivity towards that, and
Yeah.
that's okay. But what I'm able to see are the overlaps in all of those things. Just like I talked about, a D on a piano is a D on a guitar, is a D on a bass, is a D on a ukulele.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of figuring out where it is and then how all the rest of those other notes relate. And obviously that's not something that just I woke up one day and thought, oh crap, I can do that.
Yeah.
But it took just honestly a very pure love of music and learning songs and learning, all the parts on songs that I loved growing up and going, oh, that's how all these fit together.
So you would dissect songs.
I would.
So that's how the production kind of ideas kind of.
In a lot, man, it's funny. It is. In a lot of ways, it stemmed from two things. One, my parents had, a cheap little cassette recorder with a microphone on it. And then we also had a larger stereo system. And what I would do is do a very primitive overdubbing multi-tracking situation where I would record, say, a keyboard into this one cassette recorder, take the cassette tape out, put it in the big stereo, put another cassette tape in the small one, play the thing I just recorded in the big stereo system, record that back into the little cassette player, and then do something else on top of that.
Wow, so you were bouncing.
I was literally
before you even knew what.
Yeah.
Was.
I was just and it was funny because even as a young kid, I was obsessed with the Beatles, and so I understood what I was doing. It was just a very, very primitive version of what they would have been doing, which was bouncing to another tape machine and sticking it back in. But all that to say, I learned that. Oh, I can be my own band doing this. And I was young. I was 7, 8, 9 years old doing that. But then when I was around 11 or 12, my parents bought me one of those little 61-key Yamaha keyboards that are kind of the all-in-one thing. And it had a 6-track multi-tracking capability. And I just went hog wild.
I bet you did.
I mean, and it had all these functions in it that I ended up using in my daily life as a mixer and engineer. I mean, I learned what panning and delay and EQ and compression and all this stuff was to this little tiny keyboard. And I would sit down in front of my stereo with songs that I loved, and I would just listen to each part. I mean, just little tiny snippets of parts, and then remember them, and then like literally play them on the keys in this keyboard and record them and then multi-track them. So it was like, oh, well, that's how they did this. That's how these things fit together.
Yeah.
So
production came early then. Like
yeah,
the idea of creating
I loved
a song.
it. I loved how people put songs together.
So when you were dissecting it kind of all on piano. When did you start getting that itch of like, hey mom, I need a guitar. Hey mom, I need a bass?
Well, we had 2 really cheap Yamaha acoustic guitars around my house. I mean, ever since I was born, and I just never did anything with them. I don't think they were strung up at the time, or I didn't know what to do with them. And I remember being in Barnes & Noble and looking at this acoustic guitar for dummies book. And at the beginning of it, it says something to the effect of like, acoustic guitar is one of the best ways to like connect with people on a universal level. You only need to know a few chords, and you can really, you can sit around a campfire. You can sit on the front porch. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, I want to connect with people. Yeah. And so I went home a few days later. It sounds like I hitchhiked my way to Barnes & Noble. When I got home, and then a few days later, I remember asking my dad, like, hey, we've got these guitars. Can you just show me what you know? And so my dad and I sat across from each other with these 2 acoustic guitars, and he just showed me very slowly all the chord shapes. I mean, I think I learned C, E, E minor, A, D, G. I mean,
that's good. Your dad knows more than 3 then.
He knows more than 3. That's very true. He knows more shapes than that. But I mean, man, that was it. Again, like I said, all I had to do was just transfer all of the knowledge I had from piano over to that, and just get my fingers used to moving. Just technical. So that was a new type of coordination.
So when you were growing up and you were in that headspace, obviously you were incredibly committed and spending lots of time doing that. What kind of obviously you're somewhat of a savant as far as that's concerned. Like that's not a lot of people.
Thank God I can still carry a conversation and tie my shoes.
That's what I was gonna ask you. Like how was it growing up with that kind of thing? Like were you obsessed with it? Were you was it like taking over your kind of your daily thing, or were you?
I was certainly obsessed with it in the sense that all I could think about was playing keyboard, learning those songs, finding albums that I'd heard about that I'd never heard before and wanted to go find. I mean, I remember I bought Dark Side of the Moon solely because I thought the cover looked cool.
Nice.
And my neighbor's dad liked it.
Yeah.
I was like, well, this is a cool thing.
Yeah. Well, obviously the Beatles too.
I literally did not listen to anything from the time I was. Well, that's an exaggeration. From the time I was 7 to the time I was probably 12, I didn't listen to much of anything else besides Beatles records, Paul McCartney records, and like classic oldies radio that was more leaning towards like the R&B soul aspect of it. You know, I was like, I think I was so desperate to I wanted to be different than all the kids that were in my class who just kind of listened to what was on the radio and what have you. And I just loved what I heard. You know, I grew up in this tiny little white bread town in Indiana where, you know, most kids were into stuff that I wasn't into, sports and what have you. And I think be due to that, I it was like a stimulus for me to just dive in really, really, really hard because I felt safe there. That was a place where I could go
escape to.
Yeah. And it was also something I could be very present to. I think even now I have to strike that balance between it being something that it can be an escape in a good sense. Yeah. But I know that if it goes too far to a hyper obsessive point, then I've just lost sense of reality. And what that looks like now for me is basically overworking. Yeah. You know, not giving myself breaks, going, I've got to make this thing. I have to be brilliant. You know, it's crazy. So.
Yeah, in our last conversation that we had, I definitely want to dive into that. I've actually, we'll dive into it in a second, but yeah, I've actually quoted some of that conversation that we had on this podcast, and nobody ever really knows who it is until now. So specifically what your wife said to you about time.
Oh yeah. That's
really good.
Yeah, there's no such thing as I didn't have enough time.
Yeah, you just choose what you put the
time into. Whatever's important right now is what I'm choosing to do. But when I say I didn't have enough time to take out the groceries, take out the trash, or to go get groceries, or I didn't have enough time to bathe, it's like, no, I just chose to do something else. Yeah. You know, and maybe it was unconscious, but I still chose to do it. Yeah. So, yes.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna dive into that because I want to talk about creative energy and how that changes as you get older. But so as far as the moving into the production side of things, I'm curious about everybody hears music in a certain. Let me backtrack. So when you're saying, let's go back to you're 7 to 12 and you're listening to Beatles records and McCartney and stuff. You said the words, I did that because it was different than everybody else. Do you feel like you are contrarian at all? Or do you feel like you just, like, by nature, is that your thing? You're smiling at me.
It's the best and worst part of me.
Okay.
Let's put it like that.
So that's definitely something you've thought of a bunch.
Oh, certainly.
And knowing you've probably thought of a lot of things.
Well,
so,
yeah.
Yes.
No, I know that the conversation you're referring to, I referred to something called the Enneagram, which I'm very interested in and have studied a lot about. But I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, which is the artist. There's a lot to that, but basically part of that core of me is that I struggle sometimes to not sit in this paradox of where I want to be close to people and yet I need some space. It's a good way of putting it is go away but don't leave.
Yeah, I mean that's way beyond the introvert extrovert idea of how you recharge and stuff.
Sure,
like that,
I mean I'm certainly an introvert and I certainly need my time. I would call myself the outgoing introvert.
Nice,
but
which is a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah. And I mean I'm going down a rabbit hole with this, but
this is a beautiful rabbit hole.
Oh, thanks.
Let's go.
Beautiful holes.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yeah, let's definitely go down that path.
Yeah. So. But yes, to your point, I think at my best when it comes to what you're describing, what it does is it brings out a sense of clarity and direction and principle in my personality, where I go, this is how this needs to be, and I don't mean to sound like a dictator, but it's more of like, just trust me on this, and if it goes awry, that's fine. But it's more of like I have a very good sense of direction, of focus, of clarity, around my creativity. I'm much more disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
That could mean I block out my calendar in terms of, all right, this day I'm mixing, this day I'm mixing, this day I'm going to take a break, this day I work on my own songs, this day, whatever. Mm-hmm. The flip side of that is when envy, jealousy sneak in. Mm-hmm. And it's the flip side of the same coin, but it says, well, these people don't know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. You know, mm-hmm. I'm so much better than you are. Let me prove it to you. Mm. You know, so in the business we're in, there's a really deep-seated, I would say, unhealthy need to constantly prove. Yeah. Maybe more to ourselves than to somebody else, but I think oftentimes, I know I have. I've certainly wanted to prove something more to myself, but I've projected that onto somebody else to say, oh, I just need to get their approval. And what I'm really saying is, well, I don't really approve of myself right now. So,
well, I empathize with that a lot because, and I think that you and I we do different things, but we're similar in that way where we wear a lot of hats, and I mean, if we're going to make it really simple, I was talking with Emily about this, where it's kind of like, even the idea of starting this podcast, it's like, people are like, well, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, okay, maybe I can. And I've lived my life a lot where my drive when I was younger used to be like, well, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, let me show you how I can do it.
Of course.
And that's not healthy.
Right.
So as you get older, you start to say, well, where's your drive coming from? Your drive has to change. And I think over the last year that, for me, I'd like to know how it changed for you, but for me, the drive turned into, I want to just show the best version of myself and the things that I want inside of me to be put out there, and not worry about being perceived on the other side.
Totally.
And every decision, and that's not an easy thing to do, and I'm still failing at it, but every decision that I've made to just put blinders on and just do something or take a risk, it's always worked out so beautifully.
Yeah.
And I think finding the real reason why you're doing it. I think we're hard on ourselves, and I think when we're young, there was still that in there. Like, we want to be perceived, and we want to have like this. We want to share ourselves.
Oh yeah.
But the overriding like ego part of our brain is just firing on all cylinders.
I believe we need that ego for a long time.
We wouldn't be where we are without
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Ego can be. I think there's a misconception in our culture, and I understand why, because our egos never go away for some folks. Mm-hmm. And
ego can mean a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
And when I say it, and I want to be clear, like, ego is not I'm the best, you
no.
suck. Ego is how you. Ego is the thing in your brain that controls your safety.
Yes.
Like, what are you doing tomorrow? What did I do? What did I do about this problem last time so that I can not do that again?
Yeah.
It's so many things that you need.
It's constant assertion.
Yes.
Ego for me, a healthy ego building process means I'm simply looking for things in my atmosphere and my experience that are going to help me uncover these parts of myself that need confidence, that need principle, that need discipline, that need skill building, so to speak.
Yep.
My ego, in a very healthy way, drove me to learn a lot of instruments and to get really good at them, because I eventually wanted to do this for a living, and I wanted to support a family and myself and do so by doing what I love.
Yeah.
So not only was it just a creative drive, but it was also something like, man, I'm really freaking good at this.
Yeah.
And
it's okay to say that.
It's okay to say it.
I mean, I used to suppress, especially as a good Canadian boy, I used to suppress that for
old
years.
GCB.
Oh, I'm cool. Like, I'm all right. And it's like, well, no, you work your ass off to get to where you are, and you're okay. Like, you're not shouting it from the rooftops, because I know people that do that.
Totally.
I know people that I don't want particularly in my life personally, because I want the people that have a healthy, I am good at this, I believe in myself, and it's okay to believe in myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's confidence that doesn't need to leech off of somebody else's well-being.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah. That's it.
And because at that point it's not real confidence.
You're right.
It's insecurity that's being feigned as confidence.
Yeah,
So,
it's totally true.
yeah.
And it is all coming from you, and it's all coming from you for the right reasons.
Right.
And none of us would, I mean, you have to take, if you're in any creative field, you have to take a step forward where you say to yourself, I am good at this. I believe in myself. I can make a living at it. Here I go.
Right. And I think it intrinsically allows other people to come alongside us in that journey. For instance, I reached out to somebody today about a possible management situation. And it was not something where I said, I'm so freaking good at what I do, you need to be on board. It was, hey, you're really good at what you do too. I believe in what I'm doing. Can we try and put some pieces together here and make something really awesome?
Yeah.
And go from there, because this person had skills that I don't have, or at least I don't have time to manage.
Yeah, of course.
And so
You mean you can't do that too?
I
dude?
can,
What's wrong with you?
yeah, seriously, exactly.
It's just another instrument.
Right. But no, it's like healthy ego building for anybody. I would say from the time we're born up till our early to mid 30s, we absolutely need it. But past that point, we have to go, you have served me so well to get me to this point of safety and protection and confidence. And now that I know how to assert myself and be okay within my own skin, I can let you go. You can serve sometimes. It's okay, but you've done your due diligence.
Yeah. And I think, and I totally, on those ages are totally bang on. And I think that I just was watching, or I was reading a thing that Mark Manson wrote, who wrote some interesting books and great books, like The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is one of his books.
Yeah.
He's that guy, and he's similar to our age. And he wrote a really beautiful thing. It was like your life is in 3 stages. And I'm paraphrasing it and I'm going to get it wrong. But here's the idea is you learn, then there's a self-discovery phase, and then there's an exploratory phase, because you've discovered these things that you want to explore.
Right.
And I really believe our last conversation that we had is it was in that place of we're transitioning into that self-explore, like that discovery phase is ending, and we're into that exploratory phase.
Yes.
And I think that's where you've kind of developed your ego to the point where you're willing to fail, you're willing to fall, but the most important thing is that you try.
Yeah.
And I think in that middle phase, you're scared of failing.
Because I wouldn't know what I was absolutely going to be okay doing and how good I was at doing it. I think I have a lot of skill sets, and simultaneously, I also know that there are, I would say, probably 95% of the jobs in the world I wouldn't want to do.
Yeah.
Because I don't think and I've tried some of them, and I've failed hilariously and miserably at them, which only further reinforces, these are the things I'm really good at. So why don't I invest in those? Yeah. Get people around me who are going to support me, who are going to challenge me, and who can also be mirrors to me, and vice versa. Because I think this process involves mutual community or mutual understanding and a community of people around us to help sharpen the swords, so to speak.
Yeah, and the people that are really great at what they do. I mean, you are only allowing somebody, I mean, that's a big step too, especially for your ego, to be like, to allow somebody, and I know you would do this. You're an incredible drummer, but sometimes on a session you would hire another drummer, and you would bring him in for that thing,
right?
And you would allow him to be himself or herself, depending on who it is. But it's like you would allow them to be the musician that they've developed themselves to be. Oh,
and I'm so much more comfortable doing that now than I used to be. I mean,
and that's a hard thing to do.
It is, honestly, for me. For me, I would play drums on stuff because I just have a freaking blast doing it.
Yeah.
Now that's where I've landed now, and I hope to continue there. There would have been a point, say 10 years ago, when I was fresh out of school, where I was like, oh no, why did you hire that guy as opposed to me? When I'm sitting in the room in a session playing keyboards with a drummer friend of mine that's playing drums, and I've got no gratefulness in that moment for the fact that, oh, I'm here too. I was a drum and percussion major at Belmont, and I was getting more keyboard work than most of the keyboard guys at the school. I mean, it was hysterical. Yeah. So all that to say,
I know where
it's just letting go of this need to always be the best, to be on top. I remember hearing the phrase excellence over perfection, which really struck me hard, and it came from somebody who didn't know me. They just kind of sensed it in me, and I went, "Oh, that's a real situation," you know.
Excellence over perfection. Yeah, I mean, yes, I think if we can go deeper and define excellence. Again, I'm thinking about in my own journey that I'm on to define what that excellence would be, and it may be the same for you or may not, but my version of what you dealt with that, where you're looking at this player and you're like, well, I want him to do it this way. My version of the ego would be, and it started at a young age, where I would love to be on stage and I would love to rip a solo and have everybody stand up and cheer.
Oh yeah,
you know, that feels great. You know,
yes,
and it's okay to admit that. And it's like, you know, you're sitting there and you're like, I hope I get a solo on this show so that I can do that.
Right.
And I had that, and I'm sure you felt the same way, where you want to be able to be like, you don't want to be in this box, like you want to be unleashed, and you've worked so hard to be unleashed. And it got to the point then in college where it's like I'm standing up, and I used to love it, man. I used to love standing up next to a saxophone player and just like if he like ripped a beautiful solo, I would be like, all right. And I love that feeling of, well, let me elevate myself. And then it got to the point where it was like, well, I'm going to do everything I can to elevate this moment with everybody. And then it gets to the point where now at the age that I'm at, where it's like, I don't even want to play a solo. Like, I'm cool. Like, I used to chase that because I used to want to play, be able to rip on giant steps in 12 keys because I thought that was important.
Yes.
And eventually you step back and you say, well, no, that's not what I really want.
Right.
And that, to me, the excellence in that, for me, what I've figured out is the excellence in the direction that I want to head that's a really great place to be, because you can come into a new town, and I've reestablished myself in lots of different towns, probably 4 or 5 times. And you come into a town and you get up on stage and you rip and you get their attention, and all of a sudden now you're getting more work. Right. So there's that part of it, and I'm appreciative for that. But when you establish yourself somewhere and you're comfortable in your own skin, you can start to say, well, no, I don't want to go play that Rudy's gig and play standards tonight. As cool as that would be, and as fun as it would be, and everybody would think it was awesome, it's like I would rather go into my studio and write something that means something to me.
Yes.
So the thing that I appreciate about that is the fact that, and you're the same way, and I'm coming back to you about, and I want to ask you your opinion about this, but I am so appreciative that I had that drive to be excellent for perfection on so many different instruments, specifically woodwinds. So now to the point where, because I grew up playing piano and guitar came to, and it's like, it's nowhere near where you're at, but it services me for what I need for my soul and my music. And if I don't, I get somebody else. But I can now inject this artistic thing into my brand, in my soul, and spit something out that is unique. Because I've put the time in on those things. Like, I don't need to call a flute player or a clarinet player. And not only that, is I'm the producer and I'm creating the melodies that I'm hearing in my head, as opposed to telling a flute player to do it, right, or a clarinet player, and I'm doing the intricacies that I've learned over the years to create a sound that sounds like what I do. And my curiosity with you, especially with this new record that you just put out, is, when did you first of all, and I think you did, I think the answer is yes, but when did you kind of realize that you don't need to be able to, it would be awesome to play on drums, but what if you just had a really great pocket all the time and it serviced what was in your soul? I mean, maybe you want to play Cherokee at 320. I don't know.
I tried.
I mean, so did I.
I could at one point.
Yeah, and I was there too, but it's, and I've just like let go of it, and it's been so peaceful. It's like, well, no, I don't have to worry about that. Like, I can go play guitar for an hour, as opposed to like playing wee 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 and saxophone, you know. And now you have to do a certain thing to keep that up. And
Right.
you always can come back to it, and you're never going to lose certain facilities.
Right.
But when did you realize that your talents and the time you put in started to service your soul as opposed to servicing your ego?
I think they did early on. I think it took me a long time to get over the fear of, oh crap, nobody cares.
So true. And if they care, yeah, let's not go into that. You're absolutely correct.
It took me a long time to finally put out music of my own that had my voice, that were actual songs that I wrote, that weren't really B- versions of what Weird Al was doing.
Yeah.
Because, I need to hide behind humor so I don't show my heart to people.
Mm-hmm.
I think the point came when I don't know what it was about this experience, but I played with my friend John McLaughlin. You just recently did some stuff for.
Who
John's great.
And I knew him in the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
And it was a trip.
Yeah, I did too.
I was a trip to have him behind me in my studio, like singing horn parts to Vinny and I. I was like, what world is this? 'Cause I was telling him stories. Like I used to listen to him when I was living in New York City.
Yeah.
Like my buddy had his second record in New York, my roommate. And he's like, man, I got this record. It's like, it's not really my thing, but it might be your thing. And it was piano pop. And I was like, hell yeah, that's my thing. I was obsessed with that.
Yeah.
And to then have him sitting behind me, dude, it's because of you. I really appreciate that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, sorry to hijack
No, it's
that.
okay.
I had to just say how exciting and fun that was, man. That was
awesome.
a beautiful experience.
Oh, yeah. So John and I are both from Indiana, and I knew of John even before his Indiana record came out. I had some friends who were really involved in Young Life Camp, which is like a Christian outreach thing. And John was playing some sort of event for them, some sort of camp with them. And, at the time I was like, you mean the guitar player? I was like, what's he doing?
Yeah, I know.
It's like, no. This guy doesn't have an H in his first name.
Yeah.
But all that to say, I played with John. I played auxiliary keys and sang background vocals with John for a few shows in 2014. We opened up for Billy Joel.
Oh, wow.
And since then I've played with John a lot and produced some things for him. But I don't know what it was about that experience. Maybe it was being surrounded by really, really talented people. Maybe standing literally at the front of the stage for, one of the most legendary modern artists, period.
Yeah, if not in our aside from the Beatles.
It's unbelievable.
Best, Paul. Yeah.
I don't know what it was about that experience, but I just kind of, I was like, all right, let's do this. Let's really start putting some stuff in there into like let's start investing in all this inner work I was doing in counseling and so on and so forth, and let's put this into song form because to your question or back to your point, it was always serving my soul in one way or another. I think I just needed to ingest so much before I knew it was time for me to stick it out, to put it out there and go, oh, okay, now I have enough confidence to say somewhat of what I want to say. And I'm getting better at doing that. Even today, even in the past week, I think I've improved in that as I've started writing songs for my next record. I've always said that we are in the business of helping people feel their emotions deeper. And when I was a kid, when I would listen to the Beatles or McCartney or Queen or U2 or Pink Floyd or The Who, whoever, Led Zeppelin especially, I was deeply moved when I heard that stuff. And being a musician, a trained musician, which most of the people I just mentioned weren't, I went, okay, wait a minute. I want to dig into this. And I was grateful that I had my drum set instructor taught me through transcriptions of parts on records, which only solidified and I guess, further amplify the thing I was talking about earlier of like figuring out parts note for note. It was like, oh crap, here they are. They're right in front of me. This is awesome. And so what I started doing as I was learning all these instruments was going back to these records, figuring stuff out note for note, because I knew I was going to discover stuff that these males and females were doing that I thought differently. You know, they think differently than I do. And I was like, I want to see if I can get inside their head a little bit and see what this is about. Yeah. And I just kept doing that over and over and over again to the point of where I had this really large, vast musical language that kind of transcended instrument and genre and so on and so forth. And again, with help from, you know, my piano teacher, who was a huge Elton John fan, my drum instructor, who was exposing me to everything from Weather Report to hair metal to everything in between. It was like, oh, again, these are just different ways of speaking the same language. So I was very, I don't know, what's the word? I had no discrimination when it came to genres at that point. But again, I have a tendency to go down those rabbit holes.
But you're peering inside of somebody's soul.
Yes. So
you're gaining the, you're getting a language. Like you're learning a language.
Exactly. You know? I was learning how to better facilitate the way that I spoke. And so bringing it back to your original question, when it came to that being a soul thing over the ego thing, the soul thing was that I am so moved when I hear this stuff. I can't help but want to dive headfirst into it, to figure out how they're doing what they're doing, and to somehow translate that into whatever I do musically, because music is meant to be heard. It's not meant to be, I mean, this may sound blasphemous, but it's not meant to be studied in that sense. Now, obviously, you and I are great studiers, so to speak, of music, but what I mean is that...
Well, there's an intangible there that has to exist.
Absolutely. Yeah. When and no, this is no offense to anybody who's a historian, so to speak, because I certainly have a geek brain, but it's really difficult for me to be in conversations with folks where what it seems like to me is that the ultimate pinnacle of the conversations that they're having are, you know, debating what type of tape oxide was being used in Abbey Road. I'm like, I don't give a shit. Yeah. What I care about was that music moved me, and I want to get inside there.
Or why did Mozart write these 8 bars? What was he doing in his life? Who was he? You know, was he fighting with his wife? How broke was he? Was he sick during that time? He just wrote those 8 bars. Yeah. He probably needed to write them fast because he had to pay some bills.
Right.
You know.
And you know that other stuff is what it is, but it's cool. It's fine. I'll get into it.
I mean, that's for other people to explore. For sure.
But it's just like, okay, I love getting behind the curtain, getting on the other side of the glass, and yet simultaneously, again, it's a means to an end. It's not the end. You know, I've run into too many musicians that are so caught up in the craft and the technicality of it that it seems like there's a loss of the original inner movement.
The original purpose of
the purpose, the original catalyst for them to do this in the first place. You know, I can sit here and talk to you all day long about compression ratios and attack and release settings and so on and so forth, because I do it every day. But that doesn't mean anything. Yeah. We're not getting down. That's surface level stuff. It's a means to an end. You know, but if I can listen to something on a record where there's a particular vocal sound that I go, man, I really freaking love the way that sounds, and I love how I feel when I hear it, I'm going to go, all right, I want to figure out what that is. I'm not just going to do it with anything. I'm going to do it with stuff that I feel moved when I hear it.
Yeah, and I think that's been a common kind of thread, and we're obviously going deeper because we're not talking about a production of something. We're talking about something coming from your soul, and I think there's a major lesson in that for people, and I think that really separates the professionals and the non-professionals. And my belief, I remember when I was really young, a saxophone player that went to my same high school, went to my same college, and I kind of followed his path, would say to me, he's like, man, you go and you practice for 12 hours a day so that when you're up on stage, you can think about what you're having for lunch the next day. because he's just like, you're not, if you can hear, like when you listen to certain instrumentalists playing solos, you can hear them thinking.
Yes.
And that's the worst thing.
Oh, it's the worst.
And the thing about it is there's you have to come to something with a certain set of skills, and you have done this. And I think there are singer-songwriters out there that have a lot of passion, but they don't understand that they have to have skills to back that passion.
Yes.
Because we can dissect something and be like, he's pushing here, or he's behind the beat,
or he's playing
here,
this chord, or
it's wrong, and it's with this vocal. We can dissect it to that, but there comes a point where even the general public will listen to that and go, man, like how many times have you seen a great singer with all this passion, but they sound like crap?
Right.
And everybody's like, well, you're really passionate. It's like, you got to put the time in to learn the guitar. You got to put the time in to learn your voice. You got to put the time in. And I think what happens is the ultimate, you can't stop doing that. That's the thing about it. And I think the ultimate place that you can finally get to is, if you feel an emotion, something that's triggering you as an artist, that you can sit down and you have enough tools in your toolbox to not think about those tools. So you're not going like, man, that singer used this thing, I'm going to put that on this. You're sitting at the piano, and you may have a theoretical idea of, well, if I move here, it's going to create this emotion, or if I do this chord. But you can just sit at a piano and you don't think about it, and you just move without thinking about it, and you're like, oh shit, something just happened there.
Yeah.
And I'm getting chills thinking about that, because it's happened a few times in my life. And I remember capturing those moments, and I remember the output of those moments, and those are some of the things that I'm the most proud of. And it's almost like you're just working so hard on your craft and your instrument, and it's like those are a gift.
Yes. It's almost as if I find those moments are, I think this relates to your discovery leading into exploration narrative. Those moments for me are opportunities to allow all of those tools, all of those years and years and years, to breathe easy, and it gives them space to be utilized in a very pure, innocent fashion, where I'm not trying to impress anybody.
Yeah.
All I'm concerned about right now is going, okay, I've put all this work in. How can I, through a process of surrender, in a lot of ways, regurgitate all of that stuff that I've learned in a way that's going to move me just as deeply as I was moved by hearing somebody else do it.
Yeah.
There's a song on that record you mentioned that I put out, Phases. It's called Ordinary Song. It's the 5th song on the record, where there's a little piano motif in it. You can listen to it. That I had my phone recording just whatever I was coming up with at the time when I started writing that song. That little motif, it's fascinating listening to me come up with it, but it only took maybe a minute and a half. But it was one of those things where as soon as I played it, I went, oh, wow. That's got a lot of stuff in there that I really love, and I didn't practice it. I didn't think about it. It just kind of came out. And maybe I tweaked a little thing here and there, but it was like, this was such an organic, beautiful moment that, as you just mentioned, those moments are gifts. Yeah. And I think all the work that we put in to our craft, to our instrument, to these disciplines that we talk about, those are the moments where we, like I said, we kind of have to like leave the chips on the table and just allow all those things to come out in a very conscious but subconscious way. I wasn't thinking I'm going to play these notes this way and so on and so forth. It just kind of came out, and I went, that is the sound of something I've been going after for a long time, and it was always in there. Yeah. It just needed this moment, this opportunity to come out. Yeah. And so it's like writing now is much more of an opportunity and an exciting opportunity for me to allow those things to come out, as opposed to needing to sit down because I just need to write a song. Yeah. You know what I mean? So.
And I think that. I mean, I think the most interesting thing that's come out of that is the fact that that was servicing your soul. And I mean, the version of servicing your ego in that situation would be like, my God, this is a badass lick. People are gonna love this.
Or for me, sometimes being a sideman who plays with a lot of singer-songwriters, it would have been, I wonder if so-and-so is going to like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing where you're just like, this is me. This is,
Yeah.
and I'm not scared to share this.
No.
Yeah. And I think that, and when I say this word, it's a very positive thing. It's not a negative thing, because it can be. We've already brought it up as a negative thing, but I'm very envious of people that discover that early on in their life, where they go through. They're just a certain type of personality where they just don't care, and they're just willing to put themselves out there.
Mm-hmm.
And those people, I mean, we've worked with many of those people, and a lot of them are incredibly successful. Like, you think about, you think about so many of them. I mean, look at some of the famous people. I mean, I think Amy Winehouse was like that. She never had a doubt in her body about what she was doing, from what I've read or what I've heard from producers and stuff like that. And just an example of that. And unfortunately, she ended up passing very early. But yeah, I mean, or a Jimi Hendrix, like, seems
Prince,
all those Prince, yeah, perfect. Well, you see, the thing about Prince is interesting though is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is I think he cared way too much.
Well,
later on, especially.
Yes, well, and I would say early on too. I mean, the poor dude was wearing, 4-inch shoes from the time he basically started his career, because he was so insecure about his height. When you're doing splits in those types of shoes, you're going to ruin your hips, which is why he got on medication to keep the pain away. And then
I don't know a lot about that.
That's the medicine that killed him.
I see.
So
I knew it was phenylalanine. Anyway.
Something.
Which is a big problem.
Yeah. But I use him as an example because here was somebody that was so unequivocally the artist he was meant to be, and obviously a freak of talent that, regardless of what was going on behind the scenes, that dude had the capacity to kind of let go of that stuff for just a few hours a night at least, and just ripped places to shreds.
There was never a doubt when you saw him perform live.
Holy crap.
That's what he was,
Yeah, Hendrix, totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Zeppelin, totally.
But when it came to the other side of, we're talking about his singing, but we're also talking about his guitar playing. Like, that's he plays some of the most beautiful solos I've ever heard in my entire
absolutely.
life. And it's interesting because I think all of us have it, where there are certain types of our career, and where I'm not comparing us to Prince. Believe me. We'll never, I hate to say it, but we're never going to get to that place.
Yeah.
But we can get to a place that we're happy with and we're satisfied with. And that place where there's always going to be certain elements that we're insecure about. And those elements are probably the elements that are not as developed. It's like if you were to throw me in a session and put a saxophone in my hand, I'm fine. Like, you can throw whatever you want at me and I'm fine. But you throw a guitar in my hand and you put me up on a stage, I'm gonna need a couple weeks to get like a set together,
right?
But then I'll probably be fine,
right?
But there are certain things that are catching up development wise,
right?
And I wonder if his songwriting and his recording and that obsession that he had to get it perfect, might have been that element that he wasn't quite where it was with his guitar playing or his artistry on stage.
Yeah.
Or maybe he was incredibly insecure and he just went to a place that was outside of his body that we don't know about. And the real version of him was sitting in his kitchen. I don't know.
Who knows?
I know Roy ran into him in his kitchen, and he was still wearing a purple robe. Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder. I think that's the thing is we're just trying to develop enough skills to be able to let go and allow the inspiration to kind of come over us.
Yeah. Yeah, we get more. I am certainly more comfortable with that now. I think if anything, I've done so much inner work around my family of origin stuff, around the town that I grew up in, a lot of trauma work, that this stuff has become very, I won't say it's necessarily easy to talk about on a consistent basis, because it can be, I can feel certainly exhausted from it. But I would also say that it has opened up almost like a hidden treasure chest of creativity in me that in a lot of ways, as I mentioned earlier, I was afraid to dig into because I didn't know who was going to hear it, how it was going to come across, and if I'd be able to articulate it in a way that, as Bono said, is stating truth without wagging your finger at it.
That's great. I love that.
So, yeah.
Oof, I think that's what we're all trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think that truth can be buried in metaphors.
Totally.
But I think the way that it works is the way that it works best for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I mean, I was in Kroger today buying avocados and bananas. And one of my favorite Leanne Rimes, I'm not a huge Leanne Rimes fan, but when I was really in the country, I think it's her. It's that probably wouldn't be this way. Probably wouldn't hit this much. I mean, I was listening to it and I'm like, God, I forgot about that song. That is just beautiful. But it's so literal. But it worked for that moment and that person. And I think that as long as we're okay with where that truth sits, and because again, you know, poets will bury something in deep in metaphors, and to them it's like, oh, I just got that off my chest. But to you, you're like, I have no idea what the hell are you talking about.
And I mean, dude, I will say one of the coolest things that I ever did for my songwriting was our friend Andy Davis did a beta version of a songwriters club critique thing that we would do on Google Hangouts. This was a few years ago.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
It was awesome. And it was really great for me to have assignments for songs where I would get critique by people that were peers, that were respectful, that were all in a very similar situation career-wise. And that was one of the things that came up where the metaphors and the very straightforward literalism within compositions can really make or break how people relate to it, because if we're spoon feeding people everything, we're gonna choke them. But if we give them something that's so abstract that they can't relate to it, and we're the only ones that can, then it becomes much more cerebral as opposed to a heart experience. And so for me, I really love the middle ground.
Oh, I hear
in
that in your music
world,
for sure.
you know?
Especially in your harmonic concepts, for sure.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for ways. I think Stevie Wonder is a genius at doing something like this. Stevie can come up with some gnarly chord progressions in some of the most well-known pop songs of our age.
Yeah, he's burying it in there for sure.
Yeah, but it's like, great, I'll try that.
But
Cool.
it makes sense.
It makes
works.
sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not forced. You know, you and I have probably played Superstition 5,000 times.
Yeah, in all different keys.
In all different keys. But it's like, if we take that song out of context of wedding bands and so on and so forth, I mean, it is a trip.
Yeah,
man.
Especially that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And nobody ever does that right.
Nobody does. You and I will.
Yeah.
We get it.
We should have a Google Hangout for how to play pop songs
Oh my
appropriately.
gosh. Yeah. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah, the idea that I always like to call those, and they've come up in a podcast with Alex Wong is a great producer, and a buddy of mine, Stephen Mullen. I don't know if you know those guys yet. I definitely want to introduce you to them. Alex is pretty new to town. He's from New York. We had some really great production talks, and the way that they look at production is so different, and they're both incredible producers. But the idea of a left turn in a song, like how acceptable that is, and I think the sky is the limit as far as progressions are concerned, and as far as melodies are concerned, as long as they don't feel like left turns.
Absolutely.
And the first track on your record has, if I were to look at those chords, and you were to write them out for me, and I would look at that, I'd be like on the edge of my seat, like, you sure, dude? Like, could this work? But when I hear it in the context with everything that you have surrounding it, it feels completely natural. Like, the chorus changes key if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry.
It's all in B flat, but
Okay.
I kind of fake you out a little bit.
Okay.
The bridge modulates in that, but I mean, it's fascinating for me to even say this because when I wrote that, you're referring to "Home to You."
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah.
When I wrote that song, all I was trying to do was make like the upside down version of "Let 'Em In" by Paul McCartney.
Nice.
I do the same kind of walking eighth note thing in my left hand, but it was like, this just sounds good, you know. And there's a subconscious part of me that's going, oh, I know that this is an E major 9 without the whatever. I mean, we can go into this, but it's like, no, this just sounds good. We'll just go from there. And I know what I'm playing.
Yeah.
I know exactly what I'm playing, but do I want to talk about it? Nah.
No. that's a perceive, like, as a listener, what are you hearing first? How do you perceive this piece of music? And for me as a listener, I'm like, well, that's cool because I'm hearing the progression first, and then I'm listening to other things. So that's just the way that I particularly perceive that song. Whereas somebody who's not a musician would hear it, it's like people that love Steely Dan. I mean, Steely Dan's the perfect version of Left Turns.
Yep.
But they do it in a way where, I mean, they're popular as heck. I mean, people
absolutely.
love that. But that was a time in music, too, where that was more accepted as well. You know,
Yes.
and we've talked about that. We talked about that a lot, where the current situation with music, we talked a lot about it lyrically, how there isn't in the pop scene, how it's really lowest common denominator as far as what is talked about. Mm-hmm. And when I say lowest common denominator, I'm not slagging it because it's obviously successful, and I think there's people that love it, and I'm fine with that.
Right.
And I love The Weeknd. It's one of my favorite artists, and I'll listen to it forever.
Totally.
But I'm not. There's certain things that I'm listening that I love about it that's probably different than a 15-year-old girl that is in high school. So when you look at some of the stuff, some of the artists that actually are saying something, like a Taylor Swift, who is saying something about her life and a relationship that went wrong, and she's obviously taking it, and what we do as songwriters is you heighten it and make it this bigger thing that it actually is, and then you have this piece of music. So now when we talk about, and I've never had this conversation on this podcast yet about harmony and about what is digestible in 2018 as far as that stuff is concerned.
Yeah.
And my opinion on that is that it goes back to the idea of you're always going to find a fan base that's going to digest that.
Absolutely.
And it's different ages, it's different whatever, but we exist now in a situation where you don't have to play by any rules, I don't have to play by any rules, and you can find your people. Because the internet exists.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's a beautiful thing. And I think that if you use that appropriately, you can find your what you call 1,000 true fans.
Yeah.
And that's all you need, man.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to be millionaires, but what if we make a decent living playing our music? How badass is that?
A good friend of mine, who oddly enough I was a fan of before I met him, which is Derek Webb. Derek has a really great analogy for that, which is very similar to what you just said. He said, I would much rather have 1,000 fans pay me $100 a year for...
Which is like 2 records and a T-shirt.
Yeah, to come a T-shirt, come to 2 shows or whatever. I'd rather have that than have 1 million people give me 99 cents for one song, which you can't even do barely anymore now because it's going away. Yeah. Downloads are, and that's fine. It is what it is.
And that means that you have somebody that believes in you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And his point is that music, in many ways, and I'm not going to say, I will preface anything I'm about to say about the current industry with that I am not a fan of, as you kind of alluded to, slagging anybody. I have a Spotify account that I love, that I use constantly. Streaming is where we are. It's where we've been gradually for the past several years.
And you either adapt or die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm rather adapt.
Yep, me too.
So, all that to say, I think there's something to be said about aiming big for a small group of people as opposed to aiming small for the largest denominator.
Yeah, I love that.
What I don't mean is something becoming so esoteric that nobody can get with it. But, when I wrote the songs that are on my record, I wanted to write stuff that was singable, that musicians like myself could appreciate. But one of the biggest compliments that I got about my record was that, I think I subconsciously did this, was that I want my musicianship to be on display without it strangling you.
Yeah. Well, that was like when you walked in and I had it playing and that bass lick going into that verse. I just was like, Jesus, that is awesome. But it was perfect for the music. Like, it fit perfectly. Like, it set up that lyric. It wasn't like you're just like, watch this. No. It was just like, and it was just perfect. Yeah.
It's what I wanted to do.
You achieved that.
Yeah. That's as far as I'm going to go. So, anyway, yes, there you go.
And I've told your story that you talked about in our last conversation we had was obviously pretty prolific because You've been on the podcast.
It sounds like it started the podcast.
It did. But the one where you talked about flying out, I think it was Iowa or Idaho, where you did that house concert.
Oh, Iowa.
You had just gotten off the road, and you had a great time working with an artist, and you're like, man, they're gonna pay me to fly out and play a house show, and it was like 6 people. I mean, is that is that the story?
I played 2 house shows this past April, one in Des Moines, another in Minneapolis. The first show had 9 people, which 2 of those were the 2 girls who put it on, one of their sets of parents, and then a friend of mine who drove 3 hours to see the show. Nice. And brought 2 friends of his. So really like 2 people came to the show. But then the next day I played for 6 people in a random conference room at a Marriott.
Oh, wow.
Attached to the Mall of America.
Nice.
So yeah.
And I remember you told me the story of that one woman that came up to you.
Oh, the girl that during the song?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was playing Ordinary Song. As a matter of fact, I will probably never forget this. I was in the middle section, which is just this really long instrumental build. And, you know, I certainly believe in energy, in things that we perceive in and around us, in people, in our atmosphere, and so on and so forth. And I was sitting there, and I just kind of felt this, like, what just happened in here in the middle of the song? And I look up, and this girl who is sitting directly in front of me about, 10, 12 feet ahead is just weeping. Wow. And this is one of those songs that really means a lot to me. I mean, I get emotional playing it. It's again, it seems like one that was handed to me. Yeah. For all the goofy, crazy crap that happened around that trip, which I won't go into details with, just for respect of the folks. It was one of those moments where I went, "Oh, this is fine. Yeah, this is great.
This is why
this is why I'm here for that little thing right there." Because she's experiencing what I experienced years and years and years and years ago when I first started listening to music that I really loved. Yeah. And I went, "Ooh, wow. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's why I want to do this." Yeah. So.
Now then, how does that? I'm a firm believer in momentum. Mm-hmm. And I think in a career as a musician, no matter what you're doing, you ride momentum to certain heights, and then you kind of, then you jump down to another wave and ride the next thing. And it's not necessarily the wave is higher than the other wave. It's just a different wave with a different, it's a different vibe. You're doing a different trick. Yeah. And there's a video game in there somewhere. And and we've ridden those waves. Like I rode. I mean, you go back to simple stuff. Like I rode the life of a teaching wave. Then you ride the life of a playing corporate gig wave. And then you ride all these different waves, and they teach you certain things. Right. And to get to a wave that you really are happy with, because when you get to a place where you don't have to worry about riding a corporate gig wave because you're okay and your bills are paid and you can pick which wave you want to ride. Right. But you still have to treat it with the same kind of discipline, because at any time the wave could break. And in my looking at where you're at and what you're doing, in our conversation that we had last, where we were talking about how creative energy is given to us at the beginning of the day. And I've kind of thought about it a lot since then, and I've had conversations with many friends of mine about it, because we're all kind of in the same place, where we have a pie that we start with at the beginning of the day that eventually gets eaten. And we have to decide who we're going to hand that pie to. We have to decide. I
know where you're going with this.
We have to decide how much each slice costs.
Yes.
We have to decide whether it's going to give us a stomach ache.
Yeah.
And we also have to decide what kind of pie it is and whether we want ice cream on top. So it's like it's a thing where we have a certain amount of energy that we can give, and we are very lucky to do what we do and work on the records we work on, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I love, like when John was here the other day, like I loved giving my morning to his whatever, his record,
vision,
his vision, like listening to what he wants. But it's like when that's done, when that 3 hours is done in the morning, you grab lunch and then you come back and you're somewhat depleted.
Yes.
And you can choose to continue to push through, or you're like, well, let me start again tomorrow and start with my pie fresh in the morning.
Yeah.
But that requires a certain amount of discipline. So my question to you, as you move forward with your next, some quote unquote phase of your life, with this Phases record that came out, and you've got this energy, like this woman has created this, she started this little thing. She started this wave. She started this thing like, well, maybe I don't want to go out on the road and support someone for now. Maybe I want to do something that I can maybe reach a few more people or whatever. An inspiration to me comes when it comes, you know. There's a discipline to allow it to come.
Yes.
And there's a book called The Big Magic that talks a lot about that. Elizabeth
Gilbert?
Yes, thank you. And she's very much like that. It's like you have to allow it to be there, and you have to be present for it to come. And it's like if you don't go sit at the piano ever, you're never going to get that.
Sure.
So how are you changing your daily routine and your energy? I mean, I see it a little bit on some of your posts where you're like, today I'm working on this drum track for my song, or today I'm writing my song. How are you finding that you are transitioning now from this sideman producer to I want to look at what my soul is trying to say and allow that to speak?
Great question. I would say it starts with a level of professionalism that involves taking on just enough. And what I mean is that I have given away so much of my energy in the past when I was more concerned about impressing people and being the guy who played everything, co-wrote all the songs, engineered it, mixed it,
Control
whatever.
element of it.
Yeah, absolutely. When I started going, man, I would so much rather have Tyler come play on my record than learn saxophone. Then it's easy.
Yeah.
And, you know, I will say that, and I'm sure you can attest to this as well, I think the beauty of what we do and the beauty of being a professional musician, I don't mean, and when I say professional musician, I don't necessarily mean being like a 20-year-old pop artist. I mean a working instrumentalist. I think the thing that you and I have that I think a lot of people, unless you're in this, it's hard to understand, I would say.
Of course, yeah.
Is that we've spent years and years pursuing fast, easy money in hopes that one day that fast, easy money is going to overlap on top of the last batch of fast, easy money that we got, so where we don't have to work as hard. Yeah. Or now we have lots more opportunities to get residual income through licensing or publishing or what have you. We're hoping that one day those things are just going to keep overlapping bigger and bigger and bigger so we don't have to work as hard. But what I've found is that while that is true to a degree, certainly, I've also found that I can only take on so much now because I've learned the hard way what that did for my spirit, what it did for my relationships. When I was so desperate to prove to you that I'm everything I think you think I am. It's crazy. It's hard to be called a genius over and over and over and over and over again and not have to struggle with, God, really? Man, I got to live up to that? Yeah. Holy crap. To let go of that and say, you know, somebody else can do this. Yeah. I got more important things to take care of. Yeah. And those important things, I kid you not, may literally be me going, you know, I kind of want to play Legend of Zelda tonight.
Yeah, or I want to go to the lake and
I want to go see, for a hike. Yeah, I want to hang out with my wife tonight. Yeah. I want to go see a movie because I think there's just as much importance. Resting is just as much a part of work as working is. And I didn't appreciate that for a long time because I was told through a particular group of, and I don't want this to sound like I'm blaming anybody for anything. I was taught this way of living inside of the bubble we have as musicians, as working musicians, that, man, you get a gig, you got to take it.
Yeah.
Get that gig, got to take it.
Fear,
get the
man.
money, man.
It's all
Get
fear.
it. Yeah. Scarcity.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Scarcity always says there's never enough to go around, so I've got to grab it while it's hot, or else I'm going to get blacklisted and I'm going to get thrown off a cliff, and everybody's going to forget about me. Well, if I go through life needing this constant outward affirmation from other people, whether that's their compliments or their money or their time or whatever, I'm just going to be an empty shell of somebody because I'm constantly needing someone else outside of me to fill me up, as opposed to me going, yeah, I'm okay myself right now as I am. I'm enough. So to circle back to what you were asking, how have things changed and what am I doing in this phase?
Mm-hmm.
I set myself up now to have balance in my life where other people get to help carry the load.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds really, this sounds kind of like, well, duh, from a lot of folks that may work in, say, corporations or businesses or so on and so forth.
The guy from the 4-hour work week is like, dude, why did it take you so long?
Yeah, why did it take you so long?
Yeah.
But in all honesty, us being entrepreneurs, we are the business and the employee. And so we are constantly trying to figure out and we're creatives. What's the newest creative way that I can make some cash, pay my bills, have a comfortable life, and hopefully do it again tomorrow? Yeah. After a while, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Just to do that only. So for me, it was balance. And that may mean, I mean, dude, literally, when I, for instance, today I was mixing, I was finishing up some mixes for a record I was producing. I mix for 50 minutes, then I take 10 minutes and I go outside and I sit on my front porch and I just stare.
Nice.
I just go outside and watch rain.
Yeah.
And then I come back inside and do 50 more minutes and I come back outside and 10 more minutes of rest and I go back inside. Because I need that balance in my life. Well, for one, as a mixer, I need that shock to my system when I haven't heard something consistently for, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And secondly, I just need a break.
Yeah.
It's okay to rest. It's okay to chill in what we're doing. And I know that some, 21, 22-year-old, music, it's like, no, I'm probably I am the most hardworking person I know. Yeah. That is not meant to be an arrogant statement.
I don't
and
doubt
you are the most hardworking person you know.
Yeah.
Right?
And you hold yourself accountable to that.
Absolutely.
Too. Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we are workaholics. What it means is that we give a shit enough about what we do to take a break. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
The work that you and I do as creative people is so important to us beyond just the monetary gain that we get from it, that if we don't take breaks, if we don't have those moments of respite, we will go fucking crazy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I have to take breaks. I mean, the same record which you played on, I'd been producing it for literally a month straight. And after the artist went home, I said, all right, because I'm mixing the record too. I said, I'm not going to dive into mixes immediately after this because I don't have enough objectivity. I took a staycation for 10 days, like a weekend and then a full week. Yeah, I just kind of did whatever. Yeah. I actually started working on one of my songs, which was great. I wasn't planning on that, but for most of the time I played a Nintendo Switch. Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah. But my point is that balance. That's what it comes down to. It's appreciating what we do enough to take a break from it because we need those breaks. We need that objectivity. There you go.
So now how does that correlate with your music? Like, what does your week look like comparatively to what it used to look like? I mean, do you take days and put them aside? Like, if there's people out there that want to start focusing on their creative being, like, what would you recommend? Is that a scheduled thing? How does that work for you? Do you wake up and see how you feel, and you're like, oh, I can mix that record for this person today, and then tomorrow we'll see how I feel about that?
When it comes to something like that, I usually have a time crunch and somebody's paying me, so I schedule that stuff out like nobody's business. Yeah. When it comes to my own music, I mean, dude, I'd been mixing all day a few days ago, and I went in my basement and just kind of noodled around a guitar and wrote what I think is one of the best songs I've ever written. Okay. It just came out of nowhere. Yeah. I think it's difficult for me, and I think this is this is certainly a psychological cop-out thing that I do with myself. It's hard for me to schedule time to work on my stuff because I know that the best stuff I've ever done has come in moments of just sheer inspiration. Now, that doesn't mean that I haven't had times where I've said, today I'm going to go downstairs and sit at the piano and just see what happens. But it's hard for me to get out of my left brain thinking. And I'm left-handed, but my left brain turns on, my logical whatever turns on. Yeah. And I need to get out of that sometimes. I have to get into that creative place via looking for inspiration that maybe I just wasn't expecting. It could be, literally it could be anything. It could be music I hear on a commercial. It could be something that gosh, what's a good example of this? I've sat outside and recorded birds singing. I've heard I remember sitting in my wife's car one time and it was raining and the windshield wipers were moving in a certain way and it sounded like this really awesome hip hop groove the way it was hitting. It's awesome. I could do something with this. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think it's just being aware. That's what it is for me.
Allowing it to be
open
to it.
Yeah, being there. So
and I would go further to that and say allowing yourself to be open to it, but realize that don't have any expectations of coming out with anything.
Absolutely.
Just if you do it and nothing happens, be okay.
It's okay. Absolutely. I think in some ways that's probably the thing that keeps me from scheduling that time more often. Mm-hmm. But I also know that I have a lot of irons in the fire and I want to be respectful of other people's time that have invested their time and money into me.
Of course. Yeah.
So if anything, the answer to your question is I schedule my songs when I'm not working for somebody else.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I wonder if it's a situation where you I used to come away from those situations and not have anything, and I would feel like a failure, And that's the ego going what's wrong with you? Mm-hmm. You just spent 3 hours at the piano. What's your problem?
That's
and then when you create that thing, it's it's not even something that if you listen back to it, it's not something that's good. I wonder if there's a time and a place. So even for a writer, I know writer's block or whatever is a huge thing, and all creative beings have that. I wonder if there's a time when you're there and nothing's coming. If you switch to I'm going to shed something that's technical today because maybe that will bring something to light tomorrow.
Totally.
Are you ever go to that place?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I will do that sometimes. Oftentimes I will meditate.
Nice.
So my mind is not focused on I got to write a song. Something has to come out of this. When I was writing One Man Show, I distinctly remember doing that a lot because I would go into that place specifically of what would so and so think about this song, and I just had to get out of this. I need to impress, I need to prove mode, and I would just sit there at the piano and just shut my eyes and turn around and just kind of leave the song, just screw it, just let this go, and stuff usually came.
Yeah.
Because I was not thinking so hard about it. Mm-hmm. I think in some ways, the cerebral aspect of creativity is what often kills it. Mm-hmm. I think in a lot of ways that's why, it's why singer-songwriters will make fun of fusion because it's just, it just sounds like brain music,
Yeah, but it's. I did a session with Adrian Belew.
Wow.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Back. And it was fascinating watching him because I thought about this earlier in our conversation when we were talking about left turns, but that guy's the king of left turns.
Oh, yeah.
And Zappa,
yes.
That whole situation. Zappa was the master of left turns. Man. But it was interesting to watch how passionate he was about it. He believed in it like it was I've never seen before. And he got the song I forget what it was called, but we did it up at Sweetwater, and we just did the horns on it, and he did a couple guitar solos, and that's where I saw this passion. It was these crazy sections, and he was just so into it. And I'm like, man, I couldn't let that go. I couldn't do that. Like I couldn't be that passionate about something so complicated.
Yeah.
So then I remember we just went back up to Sweetwater and did something for I don't know if it was an American, I think it was an American Idol artist, but we finished that session. We were all sitting around and they're like, did they ever tell you what Adrian did at the end? And they're like, no. And I forget what the song's called. It was probably like called Little Crazy People or something like that. It was some weird name or whatever. And it was all instrumental. And he put this, like, the song ends and they're all sitting there in Sweetwater. And, you know, like the head engineer, the guy that owns it, and all the assistants and all the students that were taking this class. And it's like this crazy, like, child laughing and screaming or doing all these creepy things. And he's in the back of the room laughing his butt off, getting such a kick out of the fact that he threw them all for that left turn. And they're all sitting there looking at him like, you are nuts. But he believed in it so hard, and it mattered so much to him.
Yeah.
And I saw it in the session, and when I heard that story, I was like, man, if only all of us could believe in ourselves that much.
Chester Thompson when I was at Belmont studying drums with Chester told me that when he was playing with Weather Report, Joe Zawinul would always tell him when it came to performing, recording, whatever, he said, you must always think like a boxer. If you come into the ring and you give all your best moves straight up, or you give the same move over and over and over again, you're going to get knocked flat down. His whole thing was like, you don't have to make 180-degree turns. You don't have to make 90-degree turns. But at least do something that kind of keeps people on their toes, especially me.
Yeah.
You know, Joe wanted to be surprised because, you know, they've been playing he'd been playing standards and whatever for however many years, and they were writing their own music. It's like, do something that's going to kind of knock me off a little bit because I want to go somewhere, and I want you to help me do that. Yeah. And I'd love that. Yeah. So to your point, with Adrian or whoever it may be, I don't want necessarily a 180. I don't want, maybe sometimes I may want a 90, but man, if you, Sting is somebody who I think does this extraordinarily well. If you just give me a little bit extra over here, it's just like Sting has a way of like turning the coin over just a little bit for songs, and it's like, I didn't know you could do that with that. Ooh, dang, man, that sounds cool. And then just leave it.
Just let it sit.
Yeah, but it's like, okay, it's like, to people who aren't musicians, that stuff it's just subliminal. Yeah. And that, honestly, that's amazing because it's just a listening experience at that point, you know? But you and I can look at it and go, man, that's pretty cool. Yeah. From both a subliminal way and also like, wow, I could do something like that, you know? Who knows if he actually distinctly said, I'm going to modulate here, or I'm going to turn this song from a major to a minor. I mean, I've heard him say he's done that intentionally. Yeah. But it's like, cool. If it works, it works. Yeah. Great.
I mean, if it gets you going, you love it.
Yeah. I mean, and what you said earlier about, you asked me about when I'm writing, if it's like, okay, if I'm not getting anywhere, maybe I just need to shed on something, or maybe I need to do something else. Something that I love doing, I think I especially love doing this when I'm producing other artists that just maybe not have a lot of musical background, is if they come to me and they've got, say, 3 or 4 songs that kind of all have the same vibe.
That never happens.
I may say, would it be possible to make this into, I don't know, a 6/8 song? Or instead of it being on guitar, what if it's on piano, or vice versa? Or what if we slowed it down this much? Or what if we sped it up this much? Just to see what happens.
You're just getting the wheel spinning.
Just getting the wheel spinning. Just to see how, I guess for me, it's like how much mileage a song can have. Because at that point, it allows me as a producer, and I think this is especially pertinent as an artist, it allows me to go, oh, okay, there's a little bit more to this than I thought there was. Let's see where we can go with this. The next to last song on the Phases record, which is called What's It Gonna Take? On the record, it's me just playing classical guitar really slowly. I wrote it originally as basically a ripoff of Don't Let the Sun Catch You Crying and Desperado. It was a piano thing. But my entire record was piano based, and I kind of wanted to do something different, and I didn't want to sound cheesy.
Yeah.
I mean, I love those 2 songs I just mentioned,
Yeah.
but they've been done.
Yeah.
And so I thought,
And
well,
redone.
and redone. So I thought, well, I love this song, but I want to do it in a way that sounds like me, as opposed to just, a redheaded stepchild version.
Yeah.
So I just played it on guitar, and it opened up so much more meaning in that song for me.
And that goes to the process of, I mean, I'd be interested in your take on that, but, and you kind of touched on it, where the editing process comes in, because you have the inspiration process where you're basically just getting what you can out. I mean, I've been in that where it's the latest time it happened to me. I was driving to somebody's house, and I was telling the story the other day I was not writing it down on my phone. I tell my mother that, but it's like I was dictating just words that were coming to my head, and it's like some of it meant nothing, but it's like
Totally.
it's words that it's just like it hit me, and it's just like, oh crap, and you get it. And the hilarious part about it, not hilarious, but it was on my phone, so a message came through, and immediately I'm out of it. Like, it's gone.
Yeah.
That inspiration is gone.
Yep.
So when it comes, don't edit.
Yep.
Like, just get it out. Just write, or whatever you're doing creatively, paint, whatever it is. I guess paint's different because you can't exactly go undo on that. But if you're whatever it is, let it come, and then it comes to the editing process. And how do you kind of view that? How do you get yourself into that place?
I've done it many times. Honestly, an exercise that I use both to just process really difficult situations in life. I was using it prior to that as sort of word vomit to just get out all of this stream of consciousness stuff I just kind of had coming, like you just talked about, which is called,
such a beautiful thing. Even if you're going through a really tough part of your life,
yeah,
just get a journal and just write.
Yeah. And so it's called hot pinning. Basically, there's no editing.
Hot pinning.
Hot pinning. It's like it's a hot pin.
Oh, hot! I think it's hot pinning.
No.
Hot
like
penning.
Penning.
I love that.
So
where did you hear that?
It was at a retreat that I went to for a while.
Hot pinning.
Hot pinning. Basically, I'm writing literally everything that comes, and this is there's many different facets to this, but for one, it helps me to relinquish judgment of my thoughts, because thoughts are just thoughts. They're not reality.
Yeah.
So I write anything that comes, and I notice when I get to those spots where I want to judge myself, or I'm worried that what if so-and-so saw this? What would they think about this? Well, it doesn't matter.
No.
So I'm just going to write whatever comes, get it all out. It's almost like it's a purging process. Yeah. And nothing in it may make any sense to anybody, but it's at least just getting something out of my system. Mm-hmm. And then when I'm done, I go, whoo, table's clear.
Yeah.
Now, where do we go from here? Uh-huh. And that may have been all I needed to either work through that really difficult situation. Maybe it was a good jumping off point for where I'm going with my next song.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. It can serve both purposes. Mm-hmm. But I think in those moments, it's valuable. It's extremely valuable to me to practice just word vomiting, because who knows what's going to come out of there? Who knows what's going to lead to? I mean, I think something we're coming back to a lot is allowing ourselves the opportunities for creativity. And I know that sounds really simple, but
accepting its gift.
Absolutely. We are okay to set aside time to go, I have no idea what the hell is going to happen right now. Yeah. I have no clue. Yeah. That's okay. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of what we do, what we've been trained to do, is go, you need to know these songs in and out. You need to play them perfectly. You need to serve this artist's vision.
I'm already sitting higher up in my chair.
Yeah, it's like, oh gosh, how much am I getting paid? It better
Exactly.
be enough. No, but it's like,
how many rehearsals?
Yeah. How many hours?
Are there charts?
Do they even know what charts are?
Yes, exactly.
It's allowing ourselves to be okay with the unknown, mm-hmm. and go, great, give me something. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen here? Because we've already got all that stuff in us.
It's and just not being scared of what may come.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not judging it as it comes out, because mm-hmm. it's not even finished.
Yeah.
It's silly. And I mean, I'm not saying that as somebody who's got it down, but I certainly work more and more on when an idea comes, just to let it come. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't resonate with me deeply, it's okay. it may be a jumping off point. Again, that's what we're looking for here. We're just looking for jumping off points to get us deeper down into our core.
Absolutely.
When it comes to our creativity.
Yeah.
It doesn't always mean that we're going to... It would be like... What's a good example of this? I mean, it would be like a baby trying to jump on a trampoline for the first time. It's just going to fly all over the place, and it's going to hurt itself. And what I did the first time I jumped on one, I went straight through the springs and just right there on the old toboggan. But no, that's what we're talking about, right?
Course,
we give ourselves enough grace to go, yeah, I don't know what could happen here, but man, at least I'm willing to go into it. At least I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah. And give yourself some props for that. Pat yourself on the back and say, all right, let's get to work.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Right.
And I love that idea of this is in a book. This is something I'm writing on a piece of paper. Nobody ever has to see this. Nobody ever has to perceive this.
Right.
So I don't need to perceive this in this moment because there's no point in doing that, and that's doing nothing for the situation.
Absolutely. I certainly do. I've heard many stories of other musicians and creatives and people in general that do. I think we all have an inner critic in one way or another.
No,
sometimes,
really?
It takes the form of, for me, it can sometimes take the form of people I grew up with. Sometimes it could take the form of imaginary things or whatever. Mm-hmm. But
wow, yeah, I totally feel that.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
But it comes in forms of, I would say, the biggest judges that we've experienced in our lives, which could be ourselves, which could be other people. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that inner critic sounds like me when I'm really angry and I'm just not in my good self. But to know that it's going to speak, and I think this is applicable across the board, not just in music, it's just certainly in life. Mm-hmm. But to go, hey, I hear you, and in the past, you served me very well. Mm-hmm. I hear what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. I don't need you right now, but I sincerely appreciate what you're trying to do. Because I know from experience that anytime I try and slap that inner critic around and tell it to go away and just fuck off, basically, what I'm really doing is I'm negating a part of myself in one way or another that led me to a place where I can critique my own work, where I can edit, and I can kind of move forward. I think those parts of ourselves that we often beat ourselves up about are really, they all serve a purpose in one way or another. They just kind of went on this path over here as opposed to this path right here. And it's just kind of like, hey, I'll bring you back here and we can go over here. You can still be you, but you're going to be the best version of you.
Yeah.
You know? Oh, wow. So my inner critic can actually become a really good friend because it can help me from doing stuff that is not me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. As opposed to beating me up.
Using it for good.
Yeah. It's like, it's just being repurposed. Mm-hmm. You know?
And I think being aware of that is important. I talked about this before, but Michael Pollan wrote this book about psychoactive drugs, and he talked about this particular thing about psilocybin mushrooms and how he had never done them before in his life, and he equates this to a fast-acting version of psychotherapy. So he would be like, his experience was that he was like, I got 30 years of psychotherapy in 4 hours on this guided trip. And what he talked about, which I thought was really interesting, which is what we do when we come to these conclusions, which is what you're saying, your inner critic being your ego, your inner critic being this person that's trying to control this creative subconscious that's trying to come through. And the way that he explained it, he said he went on this thing where he actually, in his guided trip, separated himself from his ego and looked at it, like in this thing. He was staring at it and he was away from it. And he remembers that most vividly, and then reconnecting with it, and then for months and months dissecting that, so the point where his inner critic or his ego, whenever it would start showing itself, he would be okay by saying, nope, go back down, go away, I'm good, I'm okay without you, I don't need you here right now.
Right.
But he also said, I'm able to control when I need it. And I think that's what you're trying to say, is your inner critic, being your ego, is taking you down a path, and you're like, well, no, let's pull you back from there. We let you go for a little while, but let's pull back.
Yeah.
And I think coming to that conclusion is incredibly valuable.
Well, yeah, when I realized that those thoughts are, one, they're just thoughts. They're just They're not real. They're just kind of floating around up there and they pass. When I realize that those things are something that I don't need to latch on to, I don't need to give all my energy to them, then I'm a lot more free. I'm a lot more liberated. I'm in my true self at that point where I get to go, hey, again, you did really well for me in many instances, but I'm a big boy now. I've done my work. Some folks don't do that work. I'm okay now, and yes, sometimes I still feel a little scared when you speak, but I also have to go. I'm okay. I've got the tools now.
Yeah. Or I don't agree.
Yeah, or I don't agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it can be like devil's advocate at that point. It's like I hear you, but I got this thing.
But I'm cool to move over here.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the more free we are to do that, I think it's stages. Like if you're the king of going from this creative place to this finished product, because you've put the skills, and that's so many singer-songwriters or artists can't do that. They need so much help, and that's okay too.
Sure.
But you do that for so many artists, and you know that skill, so that you're able to go from words on a page to either a CD or a finished, mixed, mastered piece of music that is you. And I think that you have built yourself to that point where now you can start focusing on different elements of those and specialize in trying to get better at certain elements of that process.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love the idea that right now you're in that place where you're focusing on just absorbing that inspiration, that creative energy, and you're allowing some of the past things to be okay to be talked about.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. Because you know when you sit there and you're like, you can play piano, you can play drums, you don't have to think about those things.
Right.
But you're in this place where you're allowed to have the freedom to really focus on that starting point. Because you can get yourself to the end.
Yeah, something you said earlier when you were talking about singer-songwriters that could probably stand to benefit from some guitar lessons or what have you. One of the other things that Chester Thompson told us a lot when we'd be taking lessons from him was, after we would basically would set up. We were in a little hub, soundproof room with 2 drum sets, and Chester would be at one drum set and I'd be at the other, and we would just play, and we would just he would play something and I would just play it back to him while we were keeping time. And I remember him very distinctly telling us over and over again that, like, we're only playing this crazy out there stuff so that you have headroom.
Go to the extreme.
Go to the extreme.
Yeah, I totally
because
agree with that.
you're never going to make any money, and you're never going to impress anybody truly by doing this stuff. You're only going to just feed your own ego.
Yeah.
But what's really going on is that when you get up on stage and all you need to do is go for 4 minutes, that you're not operating at full throttle.
Yeah.
You've got somewhere to go if you need to.
Yeah.
And you don't have to think.
Yeah.
Because to your point, you can hear it when somebody's thinking. And I don't want to hear thoughts.
No.
I want to hear soul.
Hear their soul, yeah.
I want to hear something real.
Yeah.
Because those thoughts are not real. If they're thinking about what somebody else is going to do or whatever, I'm lost.
Yeah, you're just looking the other way and you're looking at your watch and you're trying to escape.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether it's a riding round or watching a jazz group or whatever, you're just like, man. And you could tell so quickly. It's just like, oh, I'm not going to take this, Yeah. Some of my most favorite players is specifically saxophone players have that, like a Chris Potter or a Seamus Blake, where it's like they're so free, and they're doing this thing at the most technically difficult things you can ever do on saxophone. It's so under their fingers that they can go to an extreme that not everybody might dig. Right. But they're singing through that instrument in an insane technical way. Right. And again, it's not for everyone, and I don't listen to it every single day, and I'm kind of more into it. I'm exploring some other things like a songwriting world and stuff like that. But there was a time where it was like that's what I was drawn to. Or a Charlie Parker. I mean, he would practice. He got embarrassed and he practiced 15 hours a day for several years and came out, and all of a sudden he was able to execute the things he was hearing. And people would get all pissed off about that back in the day, about like, well, he's ruining jazz and stuff like that. But it's just like he was just executing what he was hearing.
Yeah,
and that's what we're all trying to do.
We're always trying to work towards the thing that's in our heads, in our hearts, that we were so moved when we heard. I'm going to quote another member of U2, The Edge, who is my favorite guitar player.
Really?
Yes. The Edge has probably done more for me in my piano playing than most piano players.
Wow, interesting.
But he said something a long time ago, that he looks at notes as being expensive.
Okay.
Because he said...
It makes sense, because he doesn't play a lot of
He
them.
doesn't play a lot, but he said, I look at notes as being expensive because I want each one of them to mean something. I need them all to serve a really strong purpose. Every one of them. If I've spent all my money on all these notes, I'm broke.
Yeah.
I have nothing else to give. And so I want to make sure that whatever I spend my time and put my energy into, it's very intentional.
Yeah.
And you don't have to play as few notes as he does. I mean, he plays more than... I've studied him a lot, so he plays more than most people think.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter if you're Chris Potter or Nicholas Payton, or if you're a 13-year-old learning how to play drums.
Yeah.
What he's getting at is intention.
Yeah.
What he's getting at is doing something that's worthwhile and important, and making a concerted effort to do so. So hopefully somebody that hears it, because again, music's meant to be heard.
Yeah.
Somebody who hears it is going to go, wow. Doesn't mean you have to inspire them to take up an instrument, but it can hopefully help
reaches them on that really tribal
exactly.
level. Yeah.
It's like you just
right
cut
there.
through all the crap.
Yeah.
You got right here to me where I've been trying to go, or I didn't know how to get to.
Yeah.
You're there. Bam.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and if that's if you're listening to something and you're in a cerebral state of trying to digest it that way, it's like it's gone.
It's absolutely gone.
You know?
Absolutely.
And I would say that, I mean, and this is another conversation, but some of that, specifically in the education world, they just rip that out of it. Unless you're talking to somebody like a Chester who's experienced so many different genres.
Mm-hmm.
In the education world, you have a situation where they're just teaching the technique,
right?
And there's no soul involved in that. And there are great people that come out of that world,
right.
But you can't teach soul. You can't teach somebody to play with soul, but you can teach them how to play in all 12 keys.
Totally.
You can give them the gifts of being free to find themselves, their sound, their soul. But I think the teacher's intention of teaching that is wrong in a lot of respects, where they've never had the time and never taken the chances and risks of stepping back and struggling to find something. And that happens a lot in that education system, where you're going through the process and you get your undergrad, your master's, your doctorate, and then you go become a teacher. I think every teacher should have 10 years of their life where they have to really find themselves and get thrown into the and then not in a dungeon, but thrown into the lion's den.
Pit. Yeah.
And try to fight your way out.
Right.
And so that when you come back, whether it's teaching kids how to be a professional, as simple as that, or what if you really find your voice and you can teach kids how to do that? And the teachers that have changed my life, and obviously Chester has changed your life, and his words and the way he speaks to you is from that perspective,
right?
Of I'm giving you the tools so that you can go to the extremes to come back and find you.
I'm helping you on the path.
Yes.
This is not the path.
Yes, I am not showing you the way.
Right.
I'm
simply giving you road
steps.
signs to get down that path. But this technique is not the path.
That's a beautiful gift, man. He gave you a beautiful gift.
Yeah, I would say I'm a much better musician now on all the instruments I play than I was when I was at Belmont just ripping. Yeah. Because I find myself being much more intentional, and I've done all this work that's exterior but still interrelated to music, to creativity, that when I come back to those instruments, whether I'm playing 10,000 notes or 2, I go, whatever I'm going to do right now has to mean something.
Yeah.
It's got to mean something. I've got to have, I want to work towards, and I don't mean this to sound emotionally manipulative, I want that experience that I experienced at that little 6-person house show at the Marriott.
For sure.
You know, I want things that come out of me to help people get to that place where they go, crap, I didn't expect this to happen, but man, I need that.
Yeah. Because they're not sitting there going, wow, that chord's cool, go to that chord. His voice is great in that range.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're taking them on a journey.
Right.
You know, and I think that's the most beautiful gift that you can give people as a creative being. Like, let themselves be lost for 3 minutes, 4 minutes.
Yeah.
That's what we can do, you know. Or let themselves gain something out of this to give them strength, or allow them to emote an emotion, or allow them to pick themselves up off the ground. That's what we do, you know. That's what whether it's a saxophone solo on a record that's screaming in your face because it's like this thing that's needed in that moment, or whether it's Coleman Hawkins subtony something, or whether it's the fun clarinet thing I did on the Shelley Wright's new Christmas record. It's like it creates an emotion and a feeling and a happiness. That particular thing is like this beautiful thing that you wrote that creates this happiness. And it happens for 16 bars.
I can't tell you how many people that I mean, there's only been a few folks that have heard that, but I mean, every single one of them has said, like, man, I think like the string players who played on the record said, I think I enjoyed hearing that more than anything on the record.
No kidding. No, that's a beautiful part, man. Maybe Jeremy came up with a beautiful part on that.
He played it great.
I can't wait to hear the rest of that record.
Yeah, I'm almost done mixing it, I think, I hope.
Well, and speaking of that, let's talk about how they get your Phases record. So it's Dustin Ransom
Phases.
Yes. And that's on Spotify.
It is.
iTunes.
It's everywhere. Yep.
And the website, is it Dustin Ransom Music or just
Dustin DustinRansom.com. My
Ransom.
Instagram is Dustin Ransom Music.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, and so what's the next thing for you after Phases?
So, well, more. So
Phase 2.
I've recorded almost all of a stripped down version of that entire record.
That's right. You're telling me about that.
Yeah, and then I'm going to finish once I get some time after I'm done with this Shelley Wright record. Mm-hmm. I've also started writing songs for whatever my next record is.
Cool.
And hope to play shows around that. I mean, that's something I'm also having to consider too. I have a child on the way.
I didn't know that.
Oh, I thought I told you. Thank you. I appreciate
That's awesome.
that. And so it obviously it just changes every.
Wow.
I mean, not to mention that even before that I enjoyed being with my wife.
Yes.
So I'm in a place of just taking it one day at a time, one step at a time, one moment at a time with my music, and really just making whatever I want to make. That is, as long as I'm moved by it, I'm cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the tangible things. It's the Phases stripped down version of it. The next record I put out, which I'm currently working on when I have the time, and hopefully playing shows.
And if somebody hears you and wants you for a house show, they can contact you on the website.
Yeah, I'm not going to do too many more house shows right now.
Okay.
I think just for my time commitments and what have you, but yeah, if it's out there. What anybody wants me to do.
Yeah, it's that, and that record is really, it's quite a journey, and it's
Thank
a beautiful, beautiful record with so many layers that people can definitely.
Thanks, man.
I'm excited to hear the stripped down version of it, so that you can get even more intricate into where you're kind of what you're doing, like on certain instruments, because obviously you're going to need to cover a few things on a piano as opposed to a simple piano part.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to hear how you
totally
do that. That's
cool.
beautiful.
Thanks, man.
Well, thank you for doing this, man. It's a great chat.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
We'll do it again, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Watch this heavy heart of mine turn this water into wine. Light your match and let it glow, so I know my way home. One more game of tic-tac-toe. You be X and I'll be you. Fall in love like dominoes, then I'll come back home. If I can't find you, go get lost in the simple things. Might I remind you, chase your tail and dream those dreams. One more glass to set me free. Forget right past what's in front of me. I'll be fine, they tell me so. 'cause I know my way